Welcome to Life Beyond Clinical Practice.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Life Beyond Clinical Practice podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and we're making our way through the Courage series. We're now in episode 5, and this series is all about myth busting, right? Today, we're going to talk about fear disguised as logic and why you're not actually stuck. Now, I hear these all the time. I just need to think this through a little bit more. Or the timing isn't right. Or I need to be practical about this. These responses from mid-career health professionals all sound responsible. They're measured, logical, mature, sensible, right? But here's the uncomfortable question. What if your logic is actually fear? Just disguised fear. The problem is when being practical becomes a permanent state. No decision, no movement, just ongoing analysis that feels productive but changes nothing. That's not strategy. That's avoidance with a professional tone. Now, let's be clear. You should think about your decisions. You should consider your finances, your stability, and the timing of career change decisions. That's not the problem. The problem is when fear is disguised as logic. It's a notorious trap for keeping health professionals from exploring expanded career paths. Now, the truth is, underneath this is a deeper fear that accompanies change. It's the fear of getting it wrong. Of course, you've built a life you can be proud of as a health professional. You've studied, you've built a good reputation, you're competent, all of these wonderful things. And the thought of change brings unsettling feelings of destabilizing that good life that you've built. And of course, you don't want to make a mistake and choose the wrong path or waste your time going down a rabbit hole or pursuing a pivot path that's not aligned. Perhaps even making a move that you can't undo. So instead of deciding, you stay in evaluation mode, because as long as you're still thinking, you can't fail, right? And in your mind, you feel as if you're working on this exit plan or working on a pivot plan or working on an expansion plan, whichever's right for you. But you also can't move because thinking alone changes nothing. Now, when you're at a pivotal point in your career, fear rarely sounds like fear at all. It sounds, like I said, reasonable. I need clarity first. I should wait until things settle down, or now's not the right time financially, or I don't want to make the wrong move. Individually, these can all be valid reasons to wait. But repeated indefinitely, they simply become a pattern. And patterns reveal the truth. Because if every condition needs to be perfect before you act, you've designed a system where action never happens. And the result is that you stay exactly where you are, pretending as if everything's still okay. So how do you tell the difference between real risk versus fear-based delay? Here's a simple filter. Real constraints are specific and actionable. Fear-based logic is vague and recurring. So real constraint sounds like, I need to maintain my current income, so I'll test this 5 hours a week and see what happens. Whereas fear-based logic sounds something like this. I just don't think it's the right time. Non-specific seems like avoidance. Real constraint actually leads to a plan, but fear-based logic leads to delay. Simply delays what should be your next step. And another distinction is that real risk can be mitigated, whereas fear-based risk feels undefined. So if you can't clearly outline the risk, you're probably dealing with fear and not fact. Now let's push this a little further. You may be waiting for a level of certainty that actually doesn't exist. Not because you're incapable, but because certainty removes responsibility. If you had a guaranteed path, you wouldn't have to own the decision. So you keep searching for that right answer, but there isn't one. There are only decisions followed by adjustments. Because there is no single right path that you need to find. There are multiple viable paths that you can build. And the difference between people who move forward and those who stay stuck is not intelligence. It's simply the willingness to test, learn, adjust, to take action, not once, but repeatedly. Ask me about it. I've done it multiple times in my career, which has put me ahead of others, way ahead of others who sat on the sidelines in quiet envy, waiting for whatever certainty. And this is why career identity expansion works, because you don't need to make one perfect decision. You make a series of small, even reversible ones initially. You test, you learn, you refine. And over time, clarity compounds. Not from thinking, not from evidence, but from lived experiences, because you've tried things. And I can attest to this even in my life beyond clinical practice journey. I didn't have a clear picture when I started, but I started anyway. And I figured things out, and I'm still figuring things out today. And what started just as a podcast now is being built into an ecosystem to help health professionals on this transformative journey. So here's your question for this week. Ask yourself, what reason have I been repeating to myself that sounds logical, but is actually keeping me stuck? Name it, because once you see the pattern, it becomes harder to hide behind it. Because even when you understand fear and even when you start to act, there's still one thing that will determine whether you follow through. And that's trust. Not in the outcome, but in yourself. And that's exactly what we're going to deal with next week. So let's meet again next week for the penultimate episode of the Courage series. And I trust that as we go through this series, that something in you is being activated towards action so you can stop making excuses and start expanding your career so you can live to your full potential. Until next time, goodbye.